Let's look at the attributes of sixes. Sixes are often called loyalists, and they present themselves, of course, very loyal. They're likable, they're witty, they're caring, they're hardworking, they're excellent in the sense of practical matters, prepared, and you can trust them with what they say they'll do. They're responsible. When they're walking with the Lord, the gold that comes out of their personality is they really reflect God's security well. Tom Hanks is what comes to mind when I think of a six. There is this need to have security because there's this fear of deviance from the norm, whatever the norm would be, and sometimes fear of punishment because they're anxious about what could go wrong. So if you think about the lion in The Wizard of Oz, he's like, put him up, put him up, put him up, right? And you think he's lying, but then he just turned around and will just run, It can be very fearful, but the call for the lion in The Wizard of Oz is to step out in courage. Now, this is the only one that can be divided in half, or better yet, put on a continuum. It's not an either or, it's more that you lean towards one side or the other the majority of the time, but you can swing down the continuum if you're six. So this is really helpful to know. Phobic sixes are what you would kind of think about, like the lion in the early part of the movie. They show their fear and they seek approval. They're usually cautious, they're compliant and dependent, which is great, but they're consciously or unconsciously seeking the authority figure to give them the protection that they want. So that's what most of sixes, they lean on this side of the continuum. Every once in a while they can come back over here to what we call counterphobic six, but there are many of people, a quarter to a third or so of sixes that stay the majority of the time in this counterphobic, assertive stance. They are much more daring and confrontational. What they're trying to do is hide their fear. They don't even know they're really fearful themselves. They tend to be involved in, for example, extreme sports or really going after assertive activities. But what they're doing is they're hiding this fear behind a facade of being challenging or rebelling against authority. And so, for example, actually, a lot of people would think that they're eights when they're actually counterphobic sixes. Eights, though, are not as much fearful as much as they deal with anger. Eights will stand up. If nobody stands up for the truth, they'll do it. Sixes say, I don't know, should we? Should we not? Sixes have this inner committee going on in their head. And a lot of times they won't really know where to assert themselves or how to behave correctly. So on the outside, there might be those eight-like attributes, but if you really see, it's a fear-based reaction to the reality that you're dealing with. So for sixes, it's really helpful to memorize this statement. I become fearful when I'm living for my security, like to try to gain it myself, to meet my own needs. But when I deny myself and I live from Christ's security, the fact that He's got me, that God's got me, I become a courageous force for God and others. So that's a little bit on the six.